for 30 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, maybe more, trying to remember what I have to say. So the moment I don't see you smiling, I'll stop talking. I'll always start speaking when you're smiling. Can we have this agreement? And you agree with me, please? Seriously, I'm not joking. The holiday that we spent in Romania, at some point I had to officiate on a wedding. And you know, weddings are special moments and nice moments. You like to be part of a wedding. But when you have to preach to a wedding, and especially in a place where you haven't been for a long time before, and you see all new faces, if I can put it this way, you feel very nervous. And at some point when I was in the room behind the pulpit preparing for the beginning of the service, one guy came to me and he said, "I'm nervous." He saw me watching my Bible and thinking and trying to go back through all it. And he said, "Are you nervous about the preaching?" And I said, "Well, that's one of the rarest moments when I'm nervous about preaching. Otherwise, I'm quite comfortable and confident about it. I like it. But in these moments, I'm a bit nervous." "Don't be. Why should you be nervous about it?" So what do you mean? It's a church full with people and it's a special moment. It has to be something very special. He said, "Listen, nobody will listen to your sermon anyway. What are you talking about?" I said, "Well," he said, "there's a story about," and if you know the story, just tell me and I'll stop it, about 3 guys going for hunting. They knew that somewhere in the forest near them there's a deer, and they wanted to hunt that deer. And one of them was a lawyer, the other one was a doctor, and the third one was a pastor. I'm not a hunter, so I'm not one of these 3. As I said, if you know the story, stop me. So they went hunting, and at some point, all 3 of them saw the deer in the same moment, all 3 of them prepared in the same time, and all 3 of them took the same shot on the same time, same moment. They look at the deer and he's down. And now they were thinking, which one of us is the right guy? Who deserves the prayer? So the lawyer says, "Well, I'm an honest guy. Let me go and see." He goes, he watches the deers, he comes back, he says, "Well, I shot her. It's mine." Well, the doctor says, "Well, listen, you are a lawyer, but I'm a scientist. Let me go there, make research, analyze, apply science, and then I'll come back and I'll tell you an objective point of view about who is the one who shot the deer." He goes there, he stays for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. At the end of the day, he comes back. He says, "Well, according to my measurements, I can tell you the science never lies. The one who shot the deer is the pastor." The pastor was surprised. The lawyer was angry, and they both asked him at the same time, "Well, how do you know that? How can you say that?" Well, it was very simple. The bullet went through one ear, and came out from the other one. So the pastor is very experienced with that. Come on. I know it's not a British joke, but you're allowed to smile. I hope you don't do the same with my sermons, or with any other person's sermon. It's said when God has to speak to us, and it goes through one ear and goes out the other one. But very often, that's exactly what's happening in churches. You know what is very, very sad? And I always wanted to know how would the church look like if people coming to church on the day when they have to worship will behave the same way they behave outside the church. That would be a great church. Who is the real you? I know all of you guys, I know you like smiling, laughing, having fun. But when you come to church, you are a transformed person. Your face becomes serious immediately. You don't recognize a joke. You're afraid to laugh. What is that? Do you think that God wants someone else in your skin to worship Him? No. He wants you, the real you, to worship Him. This morning, I would like to read for you one of the most beautiful stories from the Bible. It's a story about the love between two sisters. It would be a strange love, like every other love. Love is strange. People are strange. The story begins, if we want to understand it, the story begins with Genesis chapter 29, verse 14. The middle part of the verse 14. After Jacob had stayed with Laban for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." If that's all you know about this guy called Laban, how would you think about him? What would you say about him? He's a fair guy. He's a nice person. He doesn't consider that if someone working for him is a relative of him, that means he should work for him for free. No. Everything you do should be paid. So he says, "I'm sorry, you are my relative, but I'm an honest guy. I want to pay you for what you do." So if you look at him only in this verse, he's a very nice guy. But you know the rest of the story. Yes? Can you remember? He has two daughters. One more beautiful than the other one. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And the guy that he wants to pay now says, "Okay, if you want to pay me, I'll tell you what I want. I want to marry to one of your daughters." Well, fair enough. Fine, no problem. Let's do it. But he never thought that this guy wants the other daughter that he has in mind. So Jacob says, "Okay, I want to marry one of your daughters, but that must be Rachel." He is an honest guy. What should an honest guy have to say on occasion like this? I told you I want to pay you. You told me what your wage wanted to be, and I said, "Okay, that's fine." And you make the choice. And now, what should I say if I'm not happy with that choice? Come on, think about it. "I'm sorry, Jacob, but you know, in our area here where we live, in our culture, it's not normal for the younger daughter to marry first. So if you want to marry one of my daughters, that must be Leah. And I'm happily giving to you this daughter of mine. No problem at all. When do you want to have the wedding?" He doesn't say anything about it. Please keep smiling. I can see you. And I can see even those who are sleeping now. So try to wake up and smile. Nobody will know that you were just sleeping. You know what happened? He decides to deceive the deceiver. Why do I say that? Because the meaning of the name Jacob is deceiver. And it's very interesting. Laban is a better deceiver than Jacob is. His plan is, "Oh, don't worry. He'll go to bed tonight. He's going to be so tired." Yeah, you know what that means. He won't recognize who's the woman next to him. And that's exactly what happened. Jacob goes to bed. Everything is fine until in the morning when he wakes up and there was Leah. He's very disappointed. He goes back to his uncle. He says, "Why have you done that to me?" You know what's happening? At some point, Laban says, "Listen, if you want to have Rachel, I can give it to you, but finish this daughter's bridal week first, then we will give you the other one also, in return for another 7 years of work." It's a good businessman. I won't advise you to make business with people like this. Take enough time you need to realize who's your partner. And before you jump in the business with him, make sure you know what's his next step. Because when he will make the next step, it might be too late for you to make a step back. So what can he do now? Verse 28 says, and Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. And Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob had love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel, and the whole story begins with this verse. His love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. The whole story begins with this. When he met Rachel, he realized that his love for Rachel is greater than his love for Leah. Have you ever been in a place where somebody decides to love someone else more than that person loves you? Well, I'm not talking about strangers, people that you occasionally have to deal with. No, someone that's very close to your heart. But let's say, like, you have a sister or a brother, and your parents make it very clear that your brother or your sister is the favorite son or daughter. How would you feel about that? Are you happy? Are you still smiling? No, you won't like that. And nobody would like anything like that. But that's exactly what happened between these two girls, two sisters. It was quite obvious for Rachel that Jacob loves her immensely. And it was very obvious for Leah that her husband's love for her cannot be compared to her husband's love for her sister. How would he feel? Now something interesting happens. You don't see God until this point in the story. Where is God before? He's not there. Or at least the place is not there. But at this point in the story, verse 31, something is said here about God. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Some versions of the Bible would say, but he bare Rachel. So basically, Rachel didn't have kids because God stopped her. It was his intention that Leah would have children and Rachel wouldn't. It's God's direct intervention. Now, would you like to have a direct intervention from God in your life the same way? To see his hand so clear touching your life. Would you like that?
Yes.
Well, depending. If you're Leah, yes. If you're Rachel, not really. But God touched with the same intensity Rachel as he touched Leah. That's very interesting and important. His touch enabled Leah to have children. His touch stopped Rachel to have children. It was the same touch. It was the same God. One was very happy. The other one was very sad. And you know what's happening? When you want something, what do? When you want something really, really bad, what will you do? You will go around the world if that's necessary to get what you want. I heard a story about a Hungarian guy who was in a prison camp in Russia. It was at the end of the First World War, when the war finished and the prisoners had to be released. All the Hungarians and other people who were released from Russia, they were said, now you can go home. And they never had the chance to cross the border because they were always killed before by the Russians. Every single one of them. Now, one of these guys, a Hungarian, I've forgotten his name, but at some point I will find the name and I'll give you the story. This guy said, well, I don't want to risk my life like that. I have no warranty that if I'm doing what they did, I will escape. So he says, I know something. If you have the map in front of, in your mind, Russia and Hungary are not very far, depending where you are in Russia. They were in the European part of Russia. So it's not very, very far. And he said, if I'm going the right way, the normal way, like everybody else did, I will end up being dead. So I have to do something else, something that nobody else did. So what do you think was his choice? He says, I'll go the other way around. You know, the world is a sphere. It's round. So you can be in one point going one way or another. So he says, I'll go the other way around. And that's what he did. He walked and he walked. At some point, he arrived in Japan. He worked in Japan on a ship, on a boat, for months, years. And one day, with that boat, he arrived in South Africa. He worked there for a while, and then at some point, he arrived in New York. He worked there for a while, and then at some point, he found a boat who was going to Lisbon, in Portugal. So he went to Portugal. Can you picture the map? Where is Portugal and where is Hungary? It's quite far. Few thousand miles. And he says, well, this is my chance. And he walked all the way through, from Portugal to Budapest. That's more than I drove from here to Romania. It's almost 3,000-4,000 kilometers. He walked that distance. He arrived home after many, many years, from the moment he was released. And when people heard this story, they said, how could you do that? What was in your mind? How did you thought about going all around the globe? And he says, when you really want something, you'll do it. And hope kept me alive. So I look at these two sisters. One of them wants a child. The other one received 3 from God. 3 children. And Rachel has none. The somehow she has, I need to do something to have a child. And what is she doing? It's a custom of the place that you can take another woman to be some kind of replacement for yourself. And she will make a child for you and you will take care of it. But that's not the same. And after many years having a few children from a different woman that she has chosen for her husband, she realizes, that's not what I want. I want my child. So one day, Leah's boy, Reuben, the firstborn, goes on a walk, on a field. And he finds something interesting on the field. And he found, it's not there, he found some mandrakes. Do you know what that is? It's a small plant. People say that plant has some abilities. When you use it, you become dizzy. It's like the wind, something like a very strong drop. And they also say that can give powers to women to remain pregnant. And look what's happening here. Reuben comes back from the field. He goes to his mom, Leah, already has children. And he says to her, Mom, look what I found on the field. sister. We are sisters. You already have children. And you can have more probably. But I have none. Can you help me? Please. That's verse 14, the end of it. Please give me some of your son's mandrakes. I want to have what you don't have, what you have. Can you share with me a little bit of this? What would you expect Leah to say? Think about this. Jacob is a patriarch. He has a special place in God's plan. He needs to teach people to be good people. He needs to teach people to be kind. He needs to teach people to be humble. He needs to teach them how bad it is to be selfish. Selfishness doesn't come from God. If someone is selfish, that's a sign that he's not a transformed person. He's not converted. So Rachel goes to Leah saying, my sister, you have everything. Can't you share with me a bit of this? Maybe I have a chance to have what you have. And you would expect a woman like Leah who lived so many years with her husband and learned from him to be a good person, to say what? Oh, in the end it's just a plant. Take it, I'll give it some, I will share something with you. But listen, Leah said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said. And I think she was a bit angry at this point. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. Now tell me something. You have two sisters here. Both married with one man. Is it something similar in the life of this man with what happens in the life of these two women? Can you find something similar? One day, Jacob's brother comes home. He's very hungry. And he says, brother, can you give me something to eat? Otherwise I will die. And Jacob says, oh yes, of course, you're my brother. But there's one thing I want from you. Just one thing, nothing much. The right of a firstborn. Let's make a change, an exchange. I'll give you food, you give me your right. And now you have two sisters, married with the same man. And one of them says, can I have something that you have? And the other one says, yes. But give me something in return. Now tell me something. When Esau decided to make the exchange with Jacob, was that a fair trade? It wasn't fair for Esau, but it also wasn't fair for Jacob. What about now? Men, are you with me here? Listen to these words. And women, when you go home, be careful what you do. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I have bought you with my son's mandrakes. That's his value. What do you think about that? Come on, smile! Man, can you smile to this? What do you think about Jacob? How would he feel at this point? He was happy. Two women were fighting for him. But let's think about Rachel. What was her greatest desire? To have children. How can you have children? That's a very simple way. You sleep with your husband. You don't hire him for that woman. But she thought, okay, I prayed to God and nothing happened. Now I have to take my destiny in my hands. I have to solve this problem. There must be a method to use it. And these mandrakes, the story is true. There were some plants. But in our life, for us today, as an application, mandrakes can be anything that we believe can replace God. And you know, we do that very often. Let me ask you for something. Have you ever prayed to God to give you patience? Yes. And how do you think we will receive patience from God? Very simple. So many people have this image in mind. You kneel down, you pray to God for patience, He will just pour down the patience into your heart and you are a patient guy. It doesn't work like that. Pray for patience to God and He will, and I promise you that, He will bring the circumstances in your life that you will have to learn patience. It's not just happening like that. No. And I can tell you, when you pray for patience and He brings that opportunity in your life, that's not going to be easy. Have you ever prayed for courage? I was fool enough one day to pray for that. And one of my greatest fears is fear from dogs. I'm afraid of dogs. Not small dogs, don't worry about it, big dogs. And one day I said, listen, I have all these brothers that I have to visit, and all of them live in small houses, and all of them have a dog in the garden, in the yard. And I'm afraid. Sometimes you just have to open the door and go the whole distance from the yard, and maybe you're lucky enough to find the host of the house, but most of the time you would just have to face the dog first. And I was afraid of that. And one day I prayed for that. And I said, God, give me courage. I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that I'm afraid. Afraid of dogs? Oh, I said, what kind of pastor am I if I'm afraid of dogs? And I prayed for courage. And then opportunity came for me to have courage, to show courage. And I went to visit one of my members and I knock at the gate, no answer. Knock again, a bit louder. Knock again, just to make sure that all the neighbors will know that I'm there. But my brother didn't come to the door, so I had to show my courage now. Open the door, enter the yard. The next thing that I know, my trousers, you know what happened. So, my friends, when you pray for courage, expect God to bring something in your life where you have to learn courage. Now, have you ever prayed for unity? In your family, in your church? How is that working? Put your knee down and pray day after day, month after month. Maybe one day God will just strike you with unity. And suddenly you go to church and everybody is so kind and loving and wow, it's an amazing unity there. That's not going to happen. Never going to happen like that. Do you know how it's happening? God brings something into your family. God brings something in your church where you have to work unity. God wanted Rachel to learn to trust Him. So He brought her in a place where she has to learn to trust Him. She has to decide if she's going to let God to act in her life the way He wants. And He says, Rachel, you know what? Your sister has to have 3 children. And then see. At this point she says, no, it's too much for me. How can I look at my sister and she has 3 children and I have none? I don't like that. I want to interfere. And she does that. She takes the mandrakes. She does it in her own way. What's happening? What's the result? God has a funny way of dealing with us. After Rachel gave Jacob to Leah, and she had chosen the mandrakes, do you know what happened? Irony. Leah has another 3 children. What is that? You don't want to learn the lesson first. Okay, you will learn it later, but it's more painful. You have to learn to wait for me. God has a different timetable than we have. We want everything now. Now, you see, that's not always hard to understand why. Why people today want everything now? We only have one time. Now. Not present, now. There is no past or future. Everything is now. Why? Because the furthest away in the future is, it seems to be impossible for us to achieve it. If I tell you, my friends, don't worry, in about 5 years from now, you will sell this church and you will buy a big cathedral in Middlesbrough. So many members will be in this church. What would you say? Are you joking? That's not possible. Because it seems to be so far away in time. And whatever is so further away, it seems to be like never will happen. But if you say, go to church now and you will see the church filled with people, then it's easier to believe. But with God, He has a different timetable. He said, when Jesus went back to heaven, do you remember what were the last words? I'm coming back soon. Now, some people emphasize one word, I'm coming back soon. For other people, it's important that he said, I'm coming back soon. But for most of us, the most important word there is, I'm coming back soon. And I'm sorry, but 2,000 years is not soon enough for me. Is it soon enough for you? So when you have to deal with this, you would say, that's not real, that doesn't exist. I want it now. So God, if you're coming back soon it means now for me. Are you coming back now? If you're not coming back now, that's not soon. And Rachel has to learn this lesson. And the irony is, she gets herself into a bigger trouble. She wasn't happy with her sister having 3 children. Now she's mad because her sister has 6 and she has none. We have to learn to listen. After the last child Leah had, verse 22, the Bible says, then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. Do you remember what's the name of the boy that Rachel has? Joseph. What, do you know what that means? God has taken away my disgrace. That's grace. What's the lesson here for Rachel and for all of us? The first and the most important thing about God that we all have to learn is grace. God is grace. How are we saved? Through can